KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 23 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
KSL's top story this hour. Utah election officials say it could take another week before we know the winner of Utah's 2nd congressional district race. If it goes to a recount, could take another month before it's all said and done. Utah Deputy Director of Elections Shelley Jackson says this timeline puts a big strain on election workers.
Limiting, vacation planning and some time off and time to clean up the primary election before they have to get ballots ready beginning in September for the general election already.
And right now, Congresswoman Celeste Malloy leads Colby Jenkins by fewer than 400 votes. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. In a 6-3 ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court sided with Donald Trump, finding that presidents enjoy immunity for their official acts. ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy.
Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the opinion himself, saying that while a president is not above the law, a chief executive does enjoy absolute immunity for official acts that are core to his constitutional powers, and he's entitled to the presumption of immunity for his other official acts.
The decision will likely delay the prosecution of the case accusing the former president of interfering with the presidential election in 2020. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up, but just barely, while the NASDAQ is up 107 points right now. And our KSL weather, boy, it's cooler than it was over the weekend. That's next. KSL News Time 101.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
We're the professional staff at Renaissance Ranch.
We are all recovered drug addicts and alcoholics enjoying life in recovery.
We don't see addicts as bad men trying to be good.
Rather sick men that need to get well.
This is our message to them.
That it doesn't matter how lost, beaten down, or defeated you may feel. We know you can overcome the darkness as we have.
And now, we're honored to be here for you and to show you the way out.
Our greatest desire for you is to see what we see.
That you are capable of healing.
That you are divine.
Prepare to emerge as the father, husband, and son that you were destined to be.
So to our new brother, we say, welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome to the Brotherhood of Renaissance Ranch.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
No real delays on your Valley freeways, just a little bit of curiosity slowing westbound I-80 by the accident in Tooele County near Grantsville, but overall kind of a quiet drive in progress. Get more in 2024 at the Ute Stampede Rodeo, July 10th through 13th. 90 years of family entertainment, carnival, flying cowboys, live music, and extreme bulls, July 10th. Package pricing, visit UtestampedeRodeo.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Much cooler than yesterday with a high of 87. The highs will stay in the 80s through the 4th of July. Right now, 79 degrees, mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at KSLNewsRadio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome to Inside Sources. I am Adam Gardner here with KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas, and we're filling in for Boyd Matheson today on Inside Sources.
We've got quite a show today, too.
This,
I always enjoy the 2 hours lead up with you going into these shows because I wish we could just tape that. I wish we could just have I wish we could just have the thing run and just listening to you talk. You're just a wealth of knowledge. So yeah, today's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, I am very opinionated, especially on things that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And so, Greg, I'm really excited to be here with you because we're going to be talking about a couple of different Supreme Court cases. And this is pretty recent. So in a ruling by the Supreme Court this morning on presidential immunity, a fundamental debate about the balance between executive power and accountability has kind of been reignited. This is a landmark decision, not only affecting the immediate legal challenges facing President Trump, but also this has pretty far-reaching implications for the very nature of the American presidency. So we're talking about Trump immunity here. Can you give us kind of the background on this case and set the context?
Yeah, so this one involves the January 6th insurrection and Trump's involvement in that. And he has since been charged with
four felony counts.
Yeah, 4 felony counts, inciting, disruption of a public meeting. I don't know if he was charged with that one count that the Supreme Court tossed out, the disorderly conduct or whatever it was. But yeah, he's been charged with that, and he's claiming, look, at that time, I was still president of the United States, and as president, I enjoyed some level of immunity. And let me just say this, Adam. We want our public officials to have immunity. We expect them to have immunity, and it's not so much that that they're above the law. It's that we want to have public officials. I mean, I deal with police officers all the time, and they have immunity from prosecution for some of their acts that if you and I did the exact same thing, we wouldn't.
Okay.
Because they're under color of law. They're working for the government. They're doing what they need to do, and we want our government officials to be able to act without fear of being sued.
So the idea is, let's say a police officer who has qualified immunity, you want them to have that because if they don't, they hold back and they don't.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they're going to be held personally liable, so they kind of don't do the job that they're supposed to
right.
do.
And let's say even the city executives dealing with water issues or road issues or things like that. Hey, we made a mistake. This road was unsafe. You don't want them to be sued. You give them some level of immunity. So fast forward to the President of the United States. You would expect we'd never have to deal with that. I mean, the President of the United States doesn't even get into a situation that arguably could be a felony.
It reminds me of the President Nixon. When the president does it, it's not illegal.
Right, because he did it. Right, exactly right. And Nixon, of course, resigned. He kind of got out of all his problems, and then Gerald Ford, his successor, came in and just pardoned him anyway and said, don't even bother, which was fine. It made sense because he'd taken his lumps. Trump's back in the fore. He's running again. He's a presumptive Republican nominee. We'll talk about this later, but he's probably leading as the general election poll leader right now. Anyway, he gets charged with this, and his lawyers come in and say, you can't charge somebody for something they did as the President of the United States. And the Supreme Court issued an opinion today, and it was funny because, the opinion comes out at 8:30 this morning, and we're all scrambling to read it. And it's not a 2-page opinion. I mean, this is a long one, and it's a little bit down conservative, liberal lines.
6-3.
Right, the 6-3 that we've seen far too often, but not as much as many people think. And the Supreme Court said this. They said that the president has absolute immunity, absolute 100% without question, for acts that he does, which we call the core constitutional powers. In other words, acts that are articulated in the Constitution of the United States that are given to the president. You know what I mean? Things that, appointments that he makes, war powers, that kind of a thing. He has absolute immunity. This obviously isn't that kind of a thing. This isn't a
Well, and anytime the court uses the word absolute, I kind of feel like there's going to be some sort of frenzy somewhere.
Right. And
absolute
and
immunity is a big deal.
You look at the TV right now, everybody's talking about it. Then they say the president has what we call presumptive immunity. In other words, he is presumed to be immune, but anytime you have a presumption, it's rebuttable. So the other side, the government can come in and say, we think that this is different for acts that he did, which we call official acts. In other words, acts that he does as the president of the United States that aren't enumerated in the Constitution because the Constitution isn't 8,000 pages long. But we give them authorities to, make selections and to appoint people in certain positions, ambassadors, all kinds of things that the president does that we just don't articulate in the Constitution. So for those acts, Adam, the president has what we call presumptive immunity. We will presume he's immune, and unless the government can overcome that by showing some reason why that presumption shouldn't maintain, he's immune. Then we have something called unofficial acts, where the president does something that's not in the Constitution. It's not even.
So let's say holds a rally outside on January 6th.
Well, that's a great question. Let me give you a better example. Let's say he gets drunk and gets in an accident and kills somebody. That's not an act as the president of the United States. It's not in the Constitution. It's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just because you're the president doesn't make you above the law.
Right. So they weren't willing to say just because you're a president you're above the law. So unofficial acts not related to the presidency, there is no immunity at all, and the government can prosecute them all day long. Okay, so we have this groundwork. We have this 3-step process, this 3-pronged test, I'll call it. Core constitutional powers is absolute immunity. Official acts, presumptive immunity. Unofficial acts, no immunity. Supreme Court says here's what they're, and that, to their credit, Adam, the Supreme Court then went and sort of defined, as I've tried to do, what these various levels of acts mean, how you could help define them. Because what they ultimately did is they sent the case back to the D.C. judge, who said there's no immunity here. The D.C. Circuit said there's no immunity here. The Supreme Court said, well, there might be. Let's look at what the facts of the case and decide whether.
So they weren't willing to define it for President Trump.
Right.
They said we'll define it in general.
Right.
And then give it back to
Exactly
D.C.
right. So now it goes back to the D.C. judge, who's going to have an argument, an evidentiary hearing, an argument hearing, to decide whether or not which of these 3 levels of immunity are going to apply to Donald Trump and his trial going forward. A lot of people, and I'm looking at the media, they're like, the Supreme Court, this is a huge win for the president. It's bad for America. I don't really see it that way. I mean, I think you have to give our political leaders some level of immunity. I mean, you would hope that Spencer Cox would feel like he has immunity in decisions he makes, and that he's not going to risk criminal prosecution every time he makes some sort of executive decision. Same with our president. Same with like we talk about law enforcement, fire, that type of thing. We just want our government officials to have this level. On the other hand, they weren't going to say, like Trump has said, I could walk down the street in New York and shoot somebody and I never get prosecuted. Well, no, that's not the case. So the Supreme Court wasn't willing to go as far as the Trump lawyers wanted, but they went a little further than some of the liberals are saying. I don't know that I disagree with the opinion, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, I looked at Sotomayor, her dissent was,
this is a threat to democracy.
Yeah, it's a threat to democracy. President can do this, he can do that, he can do whatever. Immunity. Not so fast. They still have to look at the conduct, look at the acts, and decide whether or not that particular conduct would be granted immunity. Now, let me tell you how this is an absolute win for Donald Trump, because the Supreme Court has taken this case. Now we're into July. A case that was argued in October, thinking we're going to get him to trial before the November election. Now we're in July. We still don't have a trial date set. And the Supreme Court has said, lower court, you need to have a hearing to decide what level of immunity even exists in this case. So, you know what I mean? So if the case doesn't get heard before November, and Trump
that would be a
wins.
win for Trump.
Absolutely. And
Just holding it.
I think in this case, there's almost no way that they're going to get this trial before November. There's not even a trial date set, and we're in July. And we still have to have a hearing to decide what level of immunity applies.
Well, we're gonna stay glued to our televisions and to KSL News Radio. Stay with us. Next up, we're gonna be talking about government spending on Inside Sources.
Hey, you there with the sparkler or that 500-gram Ariel? Keep a water hose nearby, and for heaven's sake, don't light them out of bounds. And bonus points if you lay off after midnight. We all love fireworks, but we love safe homes and a good night's sleep. A reminder from your friends at KSL News Radio.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
Do you find it exhausting getting up from your favorite chair every day? Say goodbye to discomfort and hello to a world of ease. Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical, and you have so many options when buying a lift chair. For the highest quality, always come to Alpine. Our lift chairs are more than just furniture. They're your ticket to independence and relaxation. Plus, with our spring savings event, we've just marked down some of our chairs that are ready for you to take home. With an unbelievable warranty, you can shop with confidence knowing your comfort is our priority. So stop by any of our 11 locations today and explore our high-quality inventory, or visit us online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
Attention talcum powder users. Have you had ovarian or gynecological cancer? A proposed $8 billion plan will pay those who believe they got sick from using talc products like Johnson's Baby Powder and Shower to Shower. Johnson & Johnson maintains its products are safe. You have until July 26, 2024 to vote to accept or reject the plan. For more information, visit officialtalclaims.com or call 888-431-4056. Paid for by LLT Management, LLC.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Good morning. I'm the 25% off window company.
25% off?
It's our biggest discount ever.
So what happened to the 40% off you were offering a couple months ago?
Well,
nothing. It's baloney. Hi, this is Kathy.
The Doug of Window World. When you hear those things, you know you've entered the baloney zone.
Resist the force of the baloney zone.
Call today.
281-8111.
Window World. Simply the best for less. And that's no baloney.
Summer is upon us, and do you know what your lawn wants? It wants Revive Organic Soil Treatment upon it. A Revive treatment with fertilization, aeration, and good watering is the key to building stronger roots for a healthy, lush green lawn all summer. Revive fertilizes and moves water and nutrients deeper into the soil. You'll see the difference. Revive is surefire defense against summer drought and skyrocketing water costs. Make the most of your watering with Revive Organic Soil Treatment. Apply Revive Organic Soil Treatment today. It works.
Hi, I'm Utah tax attorney Jordan Wilcox. When the IRS invades your life, keep in mind, it's not just you.
My name is Phil, and I got myself into a little bit of tax trouble by not filing taxes. I got a notice from the IRS for not filing, and another notice, and added up to like $100,000 that I owed them. As I'm sitting there in work and in shock and tearing up, what am I going to do? Because that's a lot of money.
Don't face the IRS alone. With everything in your life at stake, don't trust just anyone.
Jordan actually was close to my office in Layton, and they got the IRS to settle for $10,500.
You need someone to fight for you.
From $100,000 to $10,500 was just incredible.
Visit taxhelput.com and get relief today. Let's solve your tax problems now. Visit taxhelput.com.
Saved me from being homeless, I would imagine, and just made my world a better place.
That's taxhelput.com.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, there's still no winner in the 2nd Congressional District primary. The final outcome could be delayed for weeks if there's a recount. Second, the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity will likely delay the election interference case against former President Trump. Third, only a few days a year, but air pollution from fireworks is a serious problem on those days. 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
You're back with us on Inside Sources, and we are standing in today for Boyd Matheson. I'm Greg Skordas, and I'm with Adam Gardner. And Adam, we're going to talk about government spending. And I was just looking at a study, and according to this, our country is on what looks to be an unsustainable track when it comes to our national debt. We started 2024 with the national debt being $34 trillion. And a trillion is a number that's hard to imagine, but in context, it's a million. It's 1,000 billion. I mean, it's not like slowing down either. Yeah. It's just a big number that doesn't seem to be slowing down. We've added $720 billion just in 6 months this year. So we've added $750 billion
just to the deficit.
Just to the deficit this year so far, and we're easily looking to cross the $35 trillion mark by the end of this year, maybe even sooner. What are the effects of that? What does it mean for the younger people, our children, our grandchildren? Well, to help us break that down, we've got Gene Sturley, the co-founder of the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center and our former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Gene, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Glad to join you, Greg and Adam. Good to be here.
So tell us where we're headed and why this should be a concern to people right now.
Well, you've already identified where we're headed, that we have debt growing inexorably faster than our economy. And of course, that's impossible to sustain. The usual argument against it, which is correct, is it threatens financial collapse, which is happening in many countries. We've been dependent in this country on the dollar as our safety valve, the way some countries depend upon oil, but that's not a very safe mechanism. And much of what I read about concerns the fact that I don't think the cost is just in the future. I think the way we're spending our money is not geared to our current needs. And we may disagree on what those needs are, whether it was, COVID expenses before, which we didn't pay for, or it's military expenditures in Ukraine, or global warming, or you want lower taxes, whatever it is. We don't have the wherewithal to make changes over time, given all these commitments that are in the budget. So it's a pretty bad situation.
Gene, it's interesting because everything that you mentioned is all discretionary spending. It's something that Congress actually has power over, and from my understanding, that's only about a third of the budget. What's going to happen with entitlements?
No, you're right, exactly. Actually, it's going down towards a quarter of all spending. It's moving between a third and a quarter. I'm counting interest in there because that's also one of the sources of future costs into the future. What has happened, and it's somewhat complex to explain even to members of Congress at times, but there are two budget problems when things are out of control and you have large and growing deficits. The one is you have a profligate Congress year after year. And by profligate, I mean both spending increases and tax cuts they don't pay for. So they just keep increasing deficits year after year by adding to them in their annual appropriations. And that has been the traditional concern of the nation for most of its history. In recent years, or decades, I should say, we've had this very fast growth in what's called mandatory spending, sometimes called entitlements, but they're not all exactly entitlements. Even some of the tax credits that are in the various laws of the nation are permanent. And by being permanent, it means that it actually takes a supermajority, a type of supermajority, to actually get rid of them. And if they're permanent and growing, then you have automatic growth in the budget. And what do I mean by supermajority? Well, James Madison helped, other founders helped set up the Constitution or the Congress so that it was hard to do new things. You had to get both houses of the Congress and the president, generally speaking, behind any measure to be able to get it passed. Well, now you have to get both houses of Congress and the president behind any measure to slow down that growth. And that's unique in all our history, and it's largely due to this continual growth in these mandatory or entitlement spending programs. It's also due, but let me be fair about this, it's also due to the fact that at some point the Republicans came along and said, hey, that's all Democrats getting their spending increases. We got to have our tax cuts. So they started putting on tax cuts that they didn't pay for, and the tax cuts in some sense are also permanent. If you want to think about it, most taxes are designed to be a permanent feature. So now you got the same problem. To either raise taxes or cut the spending growth, you've got to get this type of supermajority. And I had one further dilemma here in terms of the problem, which is that the members of Congress, in some sense, are in what's classically called a prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma is a situation where you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. Because if you come along and decide you're going to cut back on spending promises or you're going to raise taxes, well, we'll kick you out of office unless somehow or another somebody else leads the way and you might join. But if they lead the way, you can attack them. So members of Congress are scared to deal with this issue because they're afraid of losing office because of what this is classically called a prisoner's dilemma. If you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't.
So, Gene, let me ask you a question, and this will show my naivety because I'm an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an economist. But
you guys are in charge of writing the laws.
Oh, thanks a lot. You're exactly right. So we've come to sort of just expect these government spending. You know, we're almost at a shutdown. Then we'll just raise the debt. We'll raise the spending that we need, and we've gotten to be a little complacent. You said something when we first started that it's caused governments to fail. It's caused markets to crash. It's caused big problems. I mean, I don't know that I'm phrasing this very well, but when do we reach a tipping point? What happens when all of a sudden you've gone too far and something is catastrophic going to happen?
You know, I don't know. As I say, we depend so much on the dollar to deal with our problem. But I don't think that's a safety valve either because most developed countries are in the same box, maybe even worse. They have higher levels, and some of them have higher levels of debt or deficits. And several of them have even lower growth rates of the population, which is also a long-term issue that we haven't even dealt with. So I don't know any specific time when all these things collapse. What I worry about, as I said earlier, is I think the problems are already on us. And I even make the case in a lot of my writing, which you could find on Substack, The Government We Deserve. But in a lot of my writing, I basically argue that we're already creating problems. We're not doing a lot for youth. We pretty much abandoned youth. I would argue that we've abandoned the working class. I would argue that people of color have a case to be made in the sense that these are the three groups, I think, that are being left behind. And I'm not arguing for them over anybody else. I'm just saying if I decide where are the needs starting to grow a lot, it's in those groups. And I don't think we're meeting their needs. So I think this is not original with me. We've already got the termites in the wood. You asked me when the building's going to collapse, and I don't know that answer.
Well, Gene, let me ask you this. So it looks like we're going to have a President Trump, President Biden rematch. Does anything change next Congress?
Well, I've never counted on elections to tell us much. In elections, the promises get even more excessive. Back to my prisoner's dilemma, nobody runs for Congress telling you what they're going to cut back on. They might say they care about the deficit, but then they always leave it, the deficit's caused by immigrants or by the rich. It's always some group that's small enough that you don't tell the voters that we, the voters, are responsible. Going to have to take some responsibility for what happens. I don't think we're going to find out through this election. I will tell you three things that are coming along that sort of force at least some action. The Social Security trust funds are inadequate to pay promised benefits in about 10 years. That is, the spending rate will be maybe 20%, 30% above the revenue rate, and we're not going to cut back on benefits for people, so you're going to have to make a decision there. Medicare is facing the same issue. Its spending is far in excess of the money that's collected in taxes. And the third one is that the real rate of interest for the first time in about 20 years is starting to become positive and real. And that was a reprieve to policymakers because interest rates for about 3 decades fell enough that they tended to prevent all this increased debt from increasing interest costs on the budget. And the study you cited earlier from the Congressional Budget Office, what's hidden in there a little bit is that they're assuming that interest rates are no longer going to be falling, but rising. So as we add to the debt, it's going to be multiplied. The cost to the budget is going to be multiplied up by the rising interest rate applied to that rising debt. So those are forcing events, not great events, but sometimes when things are bad, we do get a positive reaction. Sometimes we get a negative reaction. So that remains to be seen just how it all plays out.
That was Gene Sterling from the Irving Brookings Tax Policy. And Adam, I wish I had time for one more question, which is, what's the good news? but maybe we can have him back on a later date. When we come back, let's go to the Supreme Court again. We started the show there. Let's go back.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 a.m, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
It's 1:31 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour: the Utah legislature cracking down on repeat drunk drivers as new laws go into effect today. Here's KSL News Radio's Alexandria Bonilla.
DUIs issued in other states can now be taken into consideration by prosecutors, whereas before they couldn't technically prosecute someone as a repeat offender. The legislature is also adapting a pretrial detention provision for repeat offenders. If a driver is pulled over and arrested for a new DUI before their previous DUI charge has gone through court, police can keep them in custody instead of booking and releasing them.
Interlock devices, breathalyzers that start the car, will also be harder to wait out. And the mandatory period that offenders must have the device won't start until it's installed. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. In a 6-3 ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court sided with former President Donald Trump, finding that presidents have immunity for some official acts while in office. Here's ABC's Pierre Thomas.
You would think that the judge will look at every allegation, every charge brought forth by the special counsel, and begin to determine what is official and what is not official.
The trial in that election interference case, though, will likely be delayed past the election. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average now up on the day, but the higher increase in the NASDAQ at this hour. And coming up, looks like we're going to have a much cooler week than we had last week, and cooler than the weekend for sure. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:33.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
At JCW's, we think tipping might be getting a little out of hand. Like when you're asked to tip at the register before you've even been served. Or when you're at the yogurt shop and find yourself serving yourself. And don't even get us started on frosted tips making a comeback. That's why at JCW's, when you pay for a 3rd-pound ranch bacon cheeseburger, that's what you pay. And no one at the register is going to stare longingly at you while you awkwardly maneuver through the tip screen for food you don't even have yet. Honestly, we're just happy to see you at any of our 5 locations in Provo, South Jordan, Lehigh, Harriman, and American Fork. So come on in and enjoy some quality time and great food with family and friends. And we promise, we won't be pushing you for a tip.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's, and we just want to say thank you, and especially to our loyal customers. We want you to know that at JCW's, your business is all the tip we need. JCW's, quality and a lot of it.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the 2nd largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
Hi friends, Dan the Laptop Man here from PC Laptops. I get a lot of emails from people all the time. Here's one. Dear Dan, I hear your talk about a lifetime service guarantee. Free? Really? Please help me avoid all your fine print and be honest about what free means. You understand that we should be very wary of a free offer. Signed, Skeptical. Hi, Skeptical. I remember 22 years ago when we started PC Laptops and our lifetime service guarantee, people thought it was too good to be true. Well, after a decade, people started believing me a little bit. But it's been 22 years of having the privilege to serve our friends and neighbors like you. Our lifetime service guarantee has become the most trusted warranty in the industry. You can get a brand new PC Laptops desktop computer, and they start at only $29 a month. Check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. Here's to seeing you soon, Skeptical.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a crash affecting both directions of travel on Highway 40 in the Heber area near 20th South. This is in Wasatch County. And then for drivers in downtown Salt Lake City, Salt Lake City PD is wrapping up a crash at West Temple and 7th South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Our KSL weather much cooler than yesterday, a high of 87. We still have red flag weather in southern Utah with low humidity and gusty winds. Highs stay in the 80s through the 4th of July. And right now we're at 79 degrees and mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to Inside Sources. I'm Adam Gardner here with KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas. We're filling in for Boyd Matheson. Greg, we're going to talk another Supreme Court case. I love learning from you to figure out what the heck is going on. What, for me at least, this decision that we're going to be talking about, overturning the Chevron Doctrine.
Right.
This was a big issue during the Attorney General's race.
Yeah, this is actually, Adam, what I would consider to be the biggest case to come out of the Supreme Court this session. I know everybody's talking about Trump immunity. That's important, but that's kind of a one-off. I mean, you know, we're not going to see presidents, who knows, prosecuted like that. It's helpful law, and the Supreme Court did what they needed to do. But this is a case that turned over 40 years of precedents.
That's before I was born, Greg.
Oh, don't say that.
That's before I was born.
I've been practicing law for 2 years by then. Anyway, there's a little difference in our age here. So what happened was, and just to go back 40 years, the Environmental Protection Agency, and more specifically the Natural Resources Defense Council, passed some regulations that Chevron didn't like. Regulations with respect to environmental quality, environmental protection, that type of thing. And so Chevron brought a lawsuit against them and said, you know what, you don't get to make rules like that. And if you do, we should be able to challenge them. And the Chevron Doctrine came out, and I'm simplifying it a bit, but it really allows that if agencies pass rules and pass laws, that they're not immune, but we can't expect them to have judicial review. We can't take them to court and file a lawsuit every time they do something and say what you're doing isn't right. So long as they're not contrary to some statute, something that the legislature has passed, and that they're reasonable. So this doctrine has existed for 40 years, and we've just gone on saying, okay, the EPA is going to pass a policy, the ATF is going to pass a rule, DEA is going to do something, and as long as it's reasonable, and it's not going to be subject to judicial review.
So I've been always really bugged at Congress.
Sure.
For a lot of things, a lot of reasons. There's a reason they have like a 4% approval rating as a whole. My biggest beef with Congress was that they would write legislation, and let's say it was a clean air, clean water, whatever the bill is. They write it and say, we are going to have clean air, and then they say the rules to enforce this statute will go to the EPA,
exactly,
and they do it. So a lot of times it's Congress's fault if they don't
totally
write it in the law and they're lazy. Then it's up to the administration to just make it up.
It's up to the administrative agency to do that. Now, I'll push back a little bit because Congress just doesn't have the appetite to say how many particulates per million of sulfur can we have in the air at our coal plants. You know, you guys go figure it out. You're the experts. You do that. How much mercury can be in our drinking water? You know, maybe a little bit. Who knows? You guys go figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've given them broad discretion for 40 years. A lot of people are saying, well, what you're doing is really you're granting more and more and more regulation. We're just enacting all these administrative agencies who are enacting regulations that Congress doesn't have the appetite or the time for or the energy for, and so we're regulating everything. You can't open a car shop anymore or a dry cleaners without jumping through all kinds of hoops. And people have thought we've gone a little bit too far. Well, it turns out maybe we have. And the case is one of those cases, you and I talked about this, where it's almost fact-driven, but it was brought by some fishermen, I think on the East Coast, who were concerned that a government agency was forcing them to hire a federal regulator to sit on their boat and monitor their catch, make sure they're
catching herring,
that they're not catching protected fish. And you can just imagine this federal regulator sort of green in the face at the end of the day going, hey, you guys, can we go back to shore? But monitoring, and they had to pay for it. They had to pay for their own cop, so to speak.
So this is what was interesting to me. I felt like this was kind of the perfect case to bring to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Because Congress actually had identified which vessels would actually have to pay their own regulatory costs. Well, they ran out of money, and so lo and behold, we said the administration said we're going to just add different vessels that we think should also have to pay their own costs.
Right.
So this company
shot themselves in the foot. Yep.
Had to pay $700 a day to regulate themselves.
Right.
That was more than the captains made in most cases. That was about a third of their take-home pay. Like, you can imagine what business can survive this.
I know. And
so these herring fishermen got together and said, you know what? It's not mentioned anywhere, but there are vessels that are mentioned. We are not mentioned. We're left out for a reason. How on earth can you regulate us? And so there's a brand new court, Greg. Let's try it.
And that's exactly right. And you spelled out the facts incredibly well. Sometimes you just have facts where an agency will go a little bit too far. You remember the student loan forgiveness program. The administration said, we're going to forgive this, and somebody said, wait a minute. There are certain things you just don't get to do. That was the administration. This deals with administrative agencies, which have taken over the country. I mean, I think Trump's going to do away with a lot of our administrative agencies, and I think some people can kind of understand that logic. On the other hand, without regulation, can you imagine what some of these I hate to go to fisheries or boating, but I mean, they created the problem in the first place by capturing, catching fish and things that they shouldn't have, and creating environmental risk. And so, hey, the government steps in and says, we're going to stop this. They create these agencies. Hey, you guys go fix this problem that's going on in the boating world, and suddenly it just goes a little bit too far.
What's going to be the fallout?
Oh, I think it's going to be huge. I mean, I think that any time now we start having clean air rules, we start having clean water rules, we start having regulation with respect to public lands and use of public lands and that type of thing, it's going to be subject to oversight, subject to lawsuits that we didn't have before. Not to say it's all going to be shut down, but there's going to be much closer review of administrative agencies doing things that the public doesn't like, just for the sake of, protecting the environment or protecting the public or making sure that people are safe. Sometimes, I don't know, I hate to say it because it sounds crass, but sometimes maybe they go a little bit too far. We'll see.
The fallout from this is going to have a decades long ripple where those that are kind of opposed to regulation are going to be challenging every single thing the agencies do.
And now they
as
can.
a conservative, I'm kind of all about it.
I know.
Let's see
that's
it.
right.
Let's let it happen.
Right.
So stay with us on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio, where we're going to be talking next with Jason Perry of the Hinckley Institute about the presidential debate.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
The best things in life, they come in twos. 2 scoops of ice cream, 2 tacos. And now for a limited time, get our best deal of the year. Buy any phone when you switch to Consumer Cellular and get 2 months of service free. That's right, the same fast, reliable nationwide coverage as Big Wireless, now with 2 months free. Proof the best things in life really do come in twos. Visit consumercellular.com or call 1-888-FREEDOM. Second and third month of monthly base service fee waived for new customers with the purchase of a phone and activation by July 31st, 2024. Taxes, fees, and third-party charges will apply. See website for additional details.
KSL offers the best daily newsletter in the state. It's the 3 things you need to know. Every weekday, we deliver quality and relevant content to your inbox. No ads, no spam, just the 3 things you need to know to be informed about the world around you. Subscribe today. Visit KSLNewsRadio.com or text the word inbox to 57500. That's inbox to 57500.
Eric was way behind on his taxes.
I owed a lot of money to the IRS, almost $15,000. I tried to make payments.
The IRS wasn't satisfied with Eric's efforts, so they came after him full force.
They're coming to put a lien and a hold on all my income, my home, my car. I was just overwhelmed at what to do.
Then Eric called Optima Tax Relief.
When Optima Tax got involved, the calls would stop, the threats would stop. It was easy like 1, 2, 3.
Optima Tax Relief is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, and their team of expert tax professionals took care of Eric's problem.
I owe $15,000, and now my debt is clean. I don't owe anything.
Take Eric's advice.
If you have a tax problem, you need to call Optima Tax now.
Call Optima Tax Relief for a free consultation. Call 800-721-3955. 800-721-3955. 800-721-3955. Optima Tax Relief. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. Listen, we're fiduciaries. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. That's 888-999-6370. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. Now, imagine how that would be if you could actually retire 3 to 5 years sooner than your plan was. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan taking into consideration any rental properties that you have, any pension income that you have, your Social Security. Listen, we put that all together for you in writing. It will allow us to build your income based on inflation. You know, inflation has been rapidly rising. You and I both need a plan that whatever we start out our income at, in 5 or 10 years, we're going to need 40% more income. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
The sun is out and the temps are up. It's time to seize the day and hit the road. You were born to ride, and now's the time to make your dreams a reality. Imagine the wind in your hair as you cruise on your very own power scooter. Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical, and these scooters aren't just for getting around. They're your ticket to freedom. With speeds up to 6 miles per hour, you'll own the road like never before. From graduation to concerts and vacations, our power scooters will get you there in style and ease. Don't wait another minute. The time to ride is now. Let's start your adventure today. Visit us online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a tough new law on drunk driving takes effect today. Second, the Supreme Court says whether presidents have immunity for prosecution for what they do in office depends on whether those actions are official or unofficial. Third, our fireworks around the 4th of July leave a lot of air pollution behind. 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
And you're back with us on Inside Sources, except that you're not with Boyd Matheson today. You're with Greg Skordas and Adam Gardner. And Adam, it's been 4 days since the presidential debate, and we're still talking about it. I mean, usually it's one of those sleeper things.
Boring.
They're boring because they all have these canned answers. But I'll tell you, when I was watching the debate, and I'm not trying to say that I had this great premonition, but the first thing I was watching for was Biden's demeanor and whether or not he would do something that showed his age, because it's such a huge part of what's going on. I mean, we talk about Trump, saying things that are not true. Let's listen to him. And I was sort of conscious of both of them, and both of them filled the fears that I had. But Biden's were so much more pronounced that they become the focus of what we're talking about right now.
Well, it seems like in the past year or two that whenever someone says, hey, he's showing his age, he's not all there, the administration sends somebody out, or a senator or a press secretary, and they say, no. Behind closed doors, he's super sharp.
Right.
And it's Jon Stewart on The Daily Show said, then why didn't you film that guy?
Right.
So we know. And so they seem to have locked Joe Biden up for a few days at Camp David to prep with him. And then, just as you mentioned, he comes on TV and kind of everyone's worst fears are realized.
Well, the day of the debate, I think you and I were here and doing the show, or it was a day or two before, and we talked to Jason Perry from the Hinckley Institute at the University of Utah about the debate. I have to say, Jason, thank you for joining us, that you kind of nailed it. You told us what to look for and what to look forward to, and by and large, you were right. What did you think about the debate?
Well, yeah, it is exactly what we talked about that night. So, both candidates sort of played into the narratives that the other had set for them. But as you also just said, President Biden's was much more pronounced. I mean, it was hard to watch, but also, as you did, the questions just started to come so quickly, and that's what we sort of alluded to at the beginning. Is I don't know that I would have thought as immediate as it was, that the very question that people started having is, well, what's next? Is there a process for getting someone new? What would it take for the Democrats if they wanted to? It's so interesting that those questions started being asked so quickly after, and that's probably the best indication that we have as to how poorly it went for President Biden.
Okay, so then can you answer that question, Jason? What's next? Does he stay on the ballot? Do they work on replacing him? What happens?
Well, so the answer is, is probably, at least at this point, the answer is yes, he stays on. The news cycle today is all about President Biden's family talking to him about whether or not he should stay in or not. And I think that's an important thing to realize, is that President Biden is the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. He went through the process. He got almost all of the party delegates with him. So when they have that convention in Chicago, they are bound to him. So this is going to be one of those situations where if President Biden decides he is going to be the nominee, that he's not going to stand back, that's really his big decision to make. It's a much harder process if he wants to stay in, because all those delegates are behind him, which is why you see people today talking about what is his family counseling him to do? His closest advisors, what are they counseling him to do? And today, he's saying he plans on going forward, and that really is clearly right now his decision to make.
Jason, I've been surprised, and maybe you have too, at the number of Democrats of what I'd call left-leaning publications who have called on him publicly. I mean, I think it was the New York Times, I think it was the Washington Post. There were a couple of, or maybe it's the Atlantic, but I saw a couple of editorials that were incredibly well written, very sensitive to Biden. You've done a great job, Joe. You saved our country. You got us out of the mess that we were headed 4 years ago. Now step aside and let somebody take the reins. I mean, that to me is about as telling as anything, Jason, in terms of the public sentiment, even coming from people you would expect to be standing behind their man, notwithstanding what happened.
Yeah, Greg, that's exactly right. It's a drumbeat that's getting louder and louder. More and more people are talking about that, because at the heart of this, keep in mind, it's about President Biden and former President Trump. But what the parties want most of all, more than just who the person is they want to own the White House. I mean, that is at the heart of this thing. This is why you see these articles being written trying to talk about why President Biden should step down. It's about him, yes, but what it's even about more than just him is, can the Democrats win and keep the White House? That's what everyone wants, and that's why this conversation is taking on the tone that it has.
So tell me about the format that was used. This was kind of new. The moderators had a lot of discretion about what to ask, and they also got to mute each of the candidates, which I thought benefited Trump because he couldn't talk over somebody. What do you think about the format, and who did it benefit the most?
Well, what's interesting, and I'll just take the opportunity to say I really wish we were having that third and final presidential debate at the University of Utah as planned. So all of my comments are going to come through that lens, of course. What's interesting, and you both have had such great experience like I have with candidates, when you take that stage for a debate, you get so much energy from the audience itself. Sometimes that's just that motivation. You just kind of feel it, and it helps you as you perform. And I think that the way that the debate was set up that we just saw with no studio audience did a disservice to both of them, but I would say it did a really big disservice to President Biden. We've seen him when he's with groups that are cheering for him, that it does help him. I think that's one thing. And the second was all of it fell a little flat because there wasn't a whole lot of exchange because the microphone just got turned off so quickly. I feel like the debate lost a little something. Of course, it made it more watchable than maybe what we saw in the last election cycle, but it still made it so we missed sort of that the back and forth that sometimes you do get from a debate.
Jason, another thing that struck me about the fallout from the debate is this. A month ago, Donald Trump gets convicted in New York of 34 felonies, and we expected the needle to move. We expected there to be public change, public sentiment, people even calling for him to step down. It seems like almost none of that happened. I mean, maybe it moved a little bit. Biden has a poor debate performance, and that's an understatement. Don't get me wrong, but the fallout against him seems to be exponentially more than what we heard about Trump for being convicted of 34 felonies.
Yeah, I would say it's because of this. On the Trump side, he has his supporters that are going to be with him almost no matter what. And his performance was exactly as expected. When it comes to President Biden, he performed exactly as feared. What the Democrats were worried would happen. There were very few surprises in this debate in terms of policy or approach, or even the comments about former President Trump and his convictions looming. Those were not new things. So that's why I don't think it moved the needle that much. On President Biden, it was just that other side. It was the unknown. We're still dealing with mostly the known things on former President Trump.
Yeah, we are. Jason Perry, thank you for joining us as always. You're always so accommodating. And Adam, when we come back after the break, a surprise response from our governor about a proposed rate increase. Stay with us.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 23 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled today that presidents have immunity from prosecution for their official acts while they're in office, but not for everything they might do. KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas says today's decision will likely delay former President Trump's court case where he's accused of trying to undo the 2020 election.
The Supreme Court has kicked it back to the lower court to have a hearing to decide where it is and where this case sits, and that's going to definitely forestall a prosecution until after the November election.
Skordas tells David Dujanovic the ruling outlines 3 choices: total immunity for things covered by a president's constitutional responsibilities, presumptive immunity for official acts, and no immunity for unofficial acts. Our top story this hour from ABC News. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon says he's proud to serve prison time if it means standing up to the Biden administration. He began a 4-month sentence today for contempt of Congress. Bannon refused to comply with a subpoena for documents and testimony that was sought by the House January 6th committee. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day 50 points, while the NASDAQ is up 146. And our KSL weather, going to be cooler through the 4th of July. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
When you choose Performance Automotive in Bountiful, you're choosing selection, convenience, and exceptional service. 4 locations: Performance Ford Lincoln, Performance Honda, Performance Toyota, and Ford Truck Country. All dedicated to delivering you the best auto experience anywhere. Looking for your first car? Maybe you want rugged power or the stylish ride of your dreams. New or used. See it all at PerformanceBountiful.com. PerformanceBountiful.com.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too.
Al-Anon and Alateen can help.
Call 1-866-200-0223. or visit alanon.org/help.
Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
Our goal every day on Inside Sources is to help you divide the rage from the reason, elevate the conversation, connect the dots, and make the news make sense in your world. We have conversations with great thinkers, with great leaders, and great people who are just out there making a difference in the world. Now, we do talk about politics, but only so we can discuss society and culture. And then we explore society and culture so we can discuss principles and the people in America and the state of Utah who actually live them and apply them every day. We bring the best and brightest minds to the state of Utah, and we love to take the Utah model and send it out to our nation's capital and beyond. Every day on Inside Sources, you'll be part of that conversation. To help you understand things in a different way, we'll get you to think again about what you think you know, but most important, we're going to help you have confidence to have crucial conversations in your community and in your own home.
Join Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
Emergency traffic now brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meeks.
We have a crash in Davis County, southbound I-15 near Parish Lane in Centerville. It's blocking 2 left lanes of travel. A lot of people are exiting off of the freeway at Parish Lane, but we do have delays that have filled in very quickly and are already back to West Davis Highway. Get triple reward points on your Rewards Visa card from Cyprus Credit Union when you spend on gas and travel from now through August. Learn more or apply today at cypruscu.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Our KSL weather much cooler than yesterday with a high of 87. The highs will stay in the 80s through the 4th of July. Right now, 79 degrees and mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to Inside Sources. I'm Adam Gardner here with Greg Skordas, and we're filling in for Boyd Matheson. The voice of reason is gone, so you're going to have 2 unreasonable people
Right.
on to talk about some of the day's biggest issues. And one of those issues, I actually found out about this from a tweet from Governor Spencer Cox, and I'm going to read that post on X. We're talking, to give a little context, where Rocky Mountain Power wants to...
Can you tweet on X?
I don't know the rules.
Okay.
Tweet on X. You can X on Twitter.
Oh, there you go. Okay, there you go.
So we Rocky Mountain Power wants to raise rates on Utahns 30%. So imagine your bill going up by 30% in the next 18 months.
That's huge.
It's a big jump. So I found out about this on X. Spencer Cox, the governor, he said, the proposed rate increase from Rocky Mountain Power would be laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. The proposal is completely unacceptable. The audacity and lack of awareness with this request seriously calls into question management at Rocky Mountain Power. I will do everything I can to make sure a rate increase of that magnitude never sees the light of day.
Okay, you showed me this, I think this morning or last night, and that doesn't sound like Spencer Cox to me. Because he's such a tempered man. He's such a gentle man, and you don't expect that from him. So and I don't think this is electioneering or election year comments. I mean, there's something about that really bothered him.
Yeah, and I noticed it kind of gives him an out. A rate of this magnitude, so
Right.
we may be okay with something else.
Baby steps, RMP.
Yeah, we're going to find out what that actually means. We have a really great special guest, Robert Spenlove. He's the chief economist at Zions Bank, and he's a member of the House of Representatives representing District 42, which is in Sandy, and a good friend of mine. Robert, thanks so much for joining us.
With you.
Hey, Robert, can you give us some context on what the legislature has been dealing with and why Rocky Mountain Power would want to raise rates?
Yeah, and you have to kind of go to the basics of this market. So electricity is a natural monopoly. And so, if you think about the game Monopoly, the whole goal is to be able to dominate the board, and then you can charge whatever you want, and people have to pay it whether they like it or not. But there are certain sectors where we get these natural monopolies. And it's essentially where an industry or a sector has very high barriers to entry and startup costs that essentially prevent any rivals from being able to come and compete. And so we recognize that these monopolies exist. And so we just kind of have to operate within that understanding. But when you have high natural monopolies, then we have to have greater regulation of those industries. So that's what we have in Utah. That's what we have in most states. So what Rocky Mountain Power is doing is they're going to the Public Service Commission, which is their regulator, and they're proposing this 30% increase. Now, it doesn't automatically happen. The Public Service Commission then has to approve it. They can approve it in full, they can reject it completely, or they can do something in between. And we're right at the beginning of that process. Rocky Mountain Power wants to do it in 2 phases. The first phase will be in February of 2025, and then the next phase would be in January of 26. And so that's kind of where we are. Is they want to increase it by 30%, and now they have to get the response from the Public Service Commission.
And does the Public Service Commission, in turn, Robert, have to go through any regulation of their own? That is to say, do they have to get approval ultimately from the administration or from the House of Representatives, or where is their oversight?
Not directly. So the legislature and the governor provide that high-level policy overview and give the Public Service Commission essentially the authority to make these decisions. But then you have the governor and the legislature help appoint the commissioners and provide high-level oversight. But generally there isn't direct oversight of their decisions.
Okay, so does this have anything to do with the IPP debate that's been going on? I know you guys dealt with it in your last special session, that coal power plant down in Delta. Does it have anything to do with the Oregon wildfire settlement? Can you add a little more information, or is Utah kind of just an island with PacifiCorp and Rocky Mountain Power?
No, and that's one of the real struggles. If you think about startups, there's a point in a startup where they call it the valley of death, and it's where they can't survive on their own, but they can't get new funding. It's really energy. And so what we see is a combination of 2 things happening. So number one, we're seeing a dramatic increase in demand for electricity specific. You think about electric vehicles, cloud computing, and are just sapping all of our electricity resources. But then at the same time, we're going through a historic transition away from fossil fuels, so away from coal and natural, to renewable resources like solar and wind. So the solar and wind is expanding dramatically, but it's not expanding quickly enough to meet the demand. But then at the same time, we've got the traditional fossil fuel production is being phased out. And so coal is becoming more expensive, natural gas is becoming more expensive, and now there's this clash where we have this increased demand and a lower supply. And so that really what's happening is it's driving up prices all across the country.
But why such a market increase? I mean, wouldn't it make more sense, Robert, for Rocky Mountain to come in and say, look, we're going to do this on a tiered approach. We're going to raise our rates, 6% a year for the next 5 years or something like that, instead of just this astronomical approach, 30%, that I think they had to have assumed right at the outset was going to get tremendous pushback.
Yeah, and if you look at kind of the history of prices or of electricity prices over the last 20 years, that's what they did. So for the first decade of the new millennium, they had regular increases, but then they stopped those increases in about 2014. So it's really been 10 years since we've seen an increase in electricity prices in Utah. And now they're trying to play this catch-up where they're getting hit by these big cost increases for them, and rather than kind of just progressively increasing those the rates that they charge, they're trying to make up the difference by having a 30% increase now. But the struggle is this is getting lumped on top of everything else we're seeing, all the other inflationary increases that we're seeing. And for a lot of people, it's just too much to bear.
Is some of this government's fault? I feel like the government for a long time has really promoted electric vehicles, and they've been significantly discounted. You get a tax break. And is that putting a lot of strain on the grid? I mean, does government bear some of the responsibility for this?
Well, yes, but at the same time, so the market will do this eventually, right? The market, each of us, we're eventually going to switch over to electric cars. We're eventually going to switch over to solar and wind. We're eventually going to phase out fossil fuels. But what the government is doing is they're trying to front load that and get that changeover to happen more quickly. And what we're seeing right now, and it remains to be seen, but at least right now, they've gotten ahead of themselves, and now they're causing these kind of distortions in the market. Another aspect of this is California demand. So California has been experiencing these brownouts for the past few years. So what they're doing is they're going out on the open market and they're saying, we'll pay whatever it takes. And that's driving up the entire price for Utah and for other states as well.
Okay, we only have a couple seconds left, but how important is it to the legislature that the state of Utah has the lowest energy prices around?
I think it's important. It's been one of Utah's competitive advantages for other states. It won't be the worst thing in the world, but it will be tough. And I don't know that the average Utah consumer is going to be able to handle a 30% increase in their electricity prices.
Robert Spenlove, a member of the House of Representatives, and thank you so much for joining us. Stay with us as we're going to be talking about the sheriff's office split from UPD.
Utah news this summer will sizzle. July will mean a hot Republican convention, scalding temperatures, and the super cool announcement. For Salt Lake City 2034, keep updated each morning with Tim and Amanda from 5 to 9, Dave and Debbie and Boyd Matheson during the day, and Jeff Kaplan on the drive home from 3 to 7. Keep your KSL preset warm, and we'll report on every detail on KSL News Radio.
You've been working so hard to keep your lawn and garden looking good. Maybe it's time to make your home look incredible with new window frames and double pane glass from Advanced Window Products. If you can imagine it, they can create it at their factory in Salt Lake City. Any style, any color, security enhancements to keep your family safe. All this and factory direct pricing. You're buying local and paying less. So seal up your home and reap the energy savings with Advanced Window Products, where they've been creating windows for 38 years. No subcontractors, they're not resellers. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. And right now at their summer special, get an extra $2,500 off on 10 windows or more. They offer 0% financing and even buy now, pay later. Busy season's just hitting. Call now. Advanced Window Products, $2,500 off. But you have to call 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. Or go to advancedwindowsusa.com.
Hey, Utah! When it comes to guiding the growth of our state, you buzzed in with your comments, and we listened to what you had to say. Your feedback on the future of Utah's housing, water, transportation, and open space will continue to help our leaders make important policy decisions, preserving and improving our high quality of life in meaningful ways for years to come. So, thanks for speaking up. Learn more about our state's future at guidingourgrowth.utah.gov.
The KSL News Radio Movie Show comes to My Hearing Centers this Friday from 10 to 1. But first, discover what My Hearing Centers can do for you. My Hearing Centers uses advanced technology to diagnose and treat hearing loss. These comprehensive evaluations determine the best treatment options. Then enjoy lifetime support with regular check-ins, cleaning, and maintenance. Call My Hearing Centers at 801-701-1629. 801-701-1629 for more details. My Hearing Centers has offices from Ogden to St. George.
Hi friends, Dan the Laptop Man here from PC Laptops. I get a lot of emails with feedback from customers. Here's one. Dear Dan, I just had the best experience ever. I bought a computer from Shane at your State Street store. I asked several what I thought were really stupid questions. Shane was super courteous and made me feel comfortable through the whole process. People need to understand how important it is to support a local company, especially when your experience is so good. PC Laptops really does love me. Signed, Satisfied. I love hearing feedback like that. It really just gives me the chills. It's the whole reason why I got into the computer business in the first place. You can get a brand new PC Laptops desktop, and they start at only $29 a month. And it comes with a lifetime warranty. That means if anything goes wrong, we're going to take care of you. Just check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. At PC Laptops, we really do love you.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Davis County drivers, a huge heads up. We have 2 left lanes of traffic blocked on southbound I-15 at Parish Lane in Centerville due to a crash. It could be there for a little bit longer. You want to plan ahead. Right now, with only 2 right lanes open to traffic, we have stop and go delays that are starting to pass the West Davis Highway and on the way to Farmington. And these are stop and go delays, so you're not going to get anywhere quickly at all. Legacy might be an option, or Highway 89 if you need to go southbound, but as for now, you need to tack on an extra 15 to 20 minutes minimum to get through these delays. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
When you're getting a new roof installed, you don't want to wonder, when are they going to be done? Or even worse, what are they doing up there? You'll never have to ask when you hire IWC Roofing, because their team of certified installers will be texting you pictures from the roof. You're going to know exactly what's going on and what you're getting for your money. And on most homes, they'll do the entire job in one day. In, out, cleaned up, and they'll even power wash your driveway just to say thank you. Now, you think you'd pay a premium for this level of service, but IWC does so many roofs. They get the material for less, and they pass the savings on to you. IWC is an Owens Corning certified platinum contractor. Of course, financing is available. Even better, their summer special, up to $2,000 off your quote. But you have to make the call. $2,000 off right now. Call IWC Roofing, 801-232-5690. That's 801-232-5690. Or go to IWCRoofingUtah.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a tough new law on drunk driving takes effect today. Second, the Supreme Court says whether presidents have immunity for prosecution for what they do in office depends on whether those actions are official or unofficial. Third, our fireworks around the 4th of July leave a lot of air pollution behind. 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
And you are back with us on Inside Sources. Greg Skordas alongside Adam Gardner. And in my career as an attorney, especially involving the criminal justice system, I see so much ebb and flow, Adam, between cities that maybe they want to have their own jurisdiction, their own police department, then they go back to the county and use county resources. Fire, we've sort of done a pretty good job here in Salt Lake County. We have unified fire, although there are some islands, I think like Murray and South Salt Lake, that do their own. Then we had this split up here, or at least this, I don't know what you call it, dichotomy. Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office was divided, and our guest will help me because I'm sure I'm butchering this, to the Sheriff's Office and what we call unified police. I guess I never understood that, although I deal with unified all the time. I think they're both overseen by
just the sheriff.
The sheriff
has been
Rosie
overseen.
Rivera, right? But you helped us get a guest, our next guest here. This is Representative Jordan Tusher from the Utah Legislature, South Jordan area, who has enacted, or at least helped us get some legislation to help. I don't know. Are we now separating unified and the sheriff's office again? Jordan, tell us what's going on.
Well, thank you very much, Greg and Adam. I'm happy to be on the show today, and today's a big day. I mean, this is a pretty big change that we're going to see, where the sheriff's office is really divesting away from the unified police department. And so we saw about 70 UPD officers that are now going to be deputy sheriffs, and then UPD is just going to be focused on those cities and towns that have elected to continue with UPD.
Okay, so you're from South Jordan. South Jordan has their own police department. They're not a part of UPD. So you get into the legislature, you kind of take stock into what's happening around the county. So give us the impetus for this. What made you decide to take this? Is a big issue, and the county doesn't really like change. So Tell us the process leading up to this bill.
Yeah, I got involved initially when some of the leaders in my city started asking some questions about what the county was doing with countywide dollars that were going into the Unified Police Department. And they felt like there was some inequities there and maybe some double taxation that the citizens in South Jordan were paying for South Jordan police officers to do things, but then their county dollars were paying for UPD to go do that in other jurisdictions. They didn't think that was right. And so I started digging into it. And one of the things that I found was that the way that this was set up with the county sheriff being the CEO of the Unified Police Department created a conflict of interest. Essentially, the county was allocating certain dollars that would go to countywide resources. They'd give that to the sheriff, and the sheriff had to decide how to perform those duties. Well, being the CEO of the Unified Police Department, she chose then for the county to essentially outsource those services to UPD. And then she turned around as CEO of UPD and said, thank you, Sheriff, for giving me that money. And now she's out and using those dollars for UPD. And so I felt like that conflict of interest was a problem. There wasn't another county in the state that had a situation set up like that. And really what enabled the sheriff to be able to do that was legislation that was passed at the statewide level. And so we started with that, trying to solve the problem. And that's what kind of came to the legislation that we had and what you're seeing today.
So Representative Tusher, walk us back. I don't know, it's probably been about 15 years since the UPD was formed, and I'm sure I'm wrong. What was the impetus behind that in the first place? Because we'd always had a sheriff's office. They performed law enforcement for the unincorporated parts of the county, and it seemed fairly clear who your officers were. But then all of a sudden we see these officers wearing blue, and they have Unified Police Department. I never understood the reason why we did that in the first place.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, in your typical county, you have the sheriff that performs law enforcement duties, and then cities typically either will pay the sheriff to do the same duties in their cities, or they'll start their own police agency to do those duties. And what happened back in the day with the Unified Police Department was they looked at some other jurisdictions across the country where they had metro-like police forces. And looking at Salt Lake County and as the county continued to grow and it looked like we were going to go to wall-to-wall cities, they thought this might work really well in Salt Lake County. And so they organized a separate policing body called the Unified Police Department. But essentially, they gave jurisdiction over all of the unincorporated areas of the county, in addition to any city that wanted to opt into the service. And the idea behind that is they'd be able to pool all the resources together. They'd have economies of scale. There wouldn't be issues around jurisdictions and who needs to come in certain situations. And they really felt like that this model would grow, and even those cities that had their own police agencies would see what was going on, the cost savings they had, and they would join UPD. What happened in reality was the exact opposite. At the time, almost half of the county was part of UPD, and over the years, cities that were part of UPD or that maybe incorporated after UPD decided that they weren't getting the services that they wanted. They didn't get the customization that they wanted from their own police force. They felt like the resources weren't allocated right or whatever, and so they would start their own police forces. And so UPD continued to shrink and shrink and shrink until what we saw just recently, where there was just a handful of the metro townships that were really forced into UPD, and then 2 or 3 cities that were using UPD.
Okay, that's really good context. I want to know.
I've never understood it until just then.
That was really good.
That was really good. Yes,
you should do this for a living.
Okay,
well,
let me just say too that one of the reasons why the cities were moving away, it wasn't just the jurisdiction, right? They wanted more control, which I think is important. If cities want to pay more and they want to add more officers here or there, then they can do that with their tax dollars. But also some of the cities. I talked to the mayor of Riverton City who decided to move away from UPD, and they found that they actually saved a ton of money by opening their own policing agency. They had more officers, they were paying less money, and so there was some bloat that was going on in the county. And as you looked between what the county was paying and what UPD was paying, it was just really unclear. There wasn't a lot of transparency of where the dollars were. And that was another thing that we really wanted to see, is more transparency in this process.
And I know Harriman City has left a few years ago, and then Taylorsville City is unique because they joined and then left and then joined and then
gone back and forth. Yep.
They've left completely now a couple of years ago. So, Representative Tusher, let me ask you this: is there still like any countywide services? Is there a countywide gang task force? Is there a countywide SWAT, detective services, anything like that?
Yeah, so all of the countywide services that UPD was previously performing are now going to be covered by the sheriff. And my understanding
that's great.
is their plan is, not to decrease any of the services that they had before. But again, that will be at the direction of the county council. So every year when the county council is doing the budget, they'll work with the sheriff and figure out what are the services that we really need to have countywide. And there can be a debate, and it will be more transparent and more clear of where those tax dollars are going and whether or not they're getting the benefit from the tax dollars that they hope for.
So will Unified then have its own chief, its own buildings, its own training? Is it going to be separate from the county?
It will. And really what this bill enabled is it gave back local control to the cities and towns that were in UPD. And they really had four options. They could choose to continue to contract or to contract with the sheriff and say, hey, sheriff, we want you to do these services for us. They could start their own police force. And you could have a Magna police force or a Kearns police force, and they could do that like some of the other cities have done. They could go to another city, and we've talked with like Copperton, for example, where they may not need a lot of resources, but it might be cheaper rather than going to a UPD or the sheriff to just say, hey, West Jordan City or South Jordan City, what if we paid you to do policing services in our town here? And then the fourth option is what most of or all of these former UPD cities have decided to do, at least for now. And that is they've created their own interlocal agreement to create a police force that's going to be this UPD 2.0. And that UPD 2.0 has its own leadership, like you talked about. They'll have their deputies and police chief and whatnot. And as a group, they'll try to pull their resources together. But it won't have the oversight of the county sheriff. They'll be pulling their own tax dollars together and doing what they think is best for their county or for their cities and towns. And in talking to a lot of the leaders of those cities and towns, I think what they're just trying to keep the status quo for now, and then they'll continue to look at it. And it might become a point where Magna gets big enough and they say, hey, we want our own police force. Or maybe Copperton will look at other, agencies to do that. But
Representative
right now,
Tusher, we got to leave it there. This was the best I've ever understood.
I finally understand
I've ever understood it. Representative Jordan Tusher from South Jordan with the House of Representatives. Thanks so much for being with us. Next up, we're going to be talking about Utah primaries. Stay with us.
It's 2:31 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The man who pleaded guilty to killing Dylan Rounds has been sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison on each of 3 counts. Rounds was a farm worker whose body was found near the Utah-Nevada state line 2 years after he disappeared. James Brenner took a plea deal in the case, and that reduced the charges. The judges asked the parole board to keep him locked up, though, as long as they possibly can. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Federal law enforcement agencies say they've rescued 200 missing children in one nationwide operation. Many of those rescued were endangered runaways and custodial interference cases. Here's ABC's Brian Clark.
This operation focused on hotspot cities, including Miami and Phoenix, which saw the most children rescued. Brian Clark, ABC News.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day 50 points, while the NASDAQ was up 146. And our KSL weather looks like things are going to stay in the 80s for the next several days, including the 4th of July. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back. I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you are always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
My son loves to fly kites, but my active psoriatic arthritis can sometimes hold me back. Now with Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm ready to go. Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults, helps with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. For those who also have plaque psoriasis, 90% clearer skin is possible with just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement, and that means everything. Ask your doctor about Skyrizi today and visit Skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKYRIZI to learn more.
We have some exciting news to announce.
Master Electrical Service has joined Mountain Home Services.
And I can speak from experience, Deb. Mountain Home Services installed my furnace years ago, and it's been amazing.
And we know Master Electrical Service has been your trusted source for all your electrical needs, like your EV chargers, your generators, and recessed lighting.
But now that they've joined Mountain Home Services, they can help you with your HVAC, your heating and air, as well as your plumbing.
And it comes with that upfront pricing guarantee. I love the upfront pricing guarantee because it means no hidden fees.
100% satisfaction guarantee as well.
Master Electrical Service has been the name you trust since 1954.
They're the company we trust, and so can you.
Check them out now at mountainhomeutah.com.
That's mountainhomeutah.com, or give them a call at 801-543-2222. So easy to remember, 801-543-2222.
Emergency traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Heavy delays continue in Davis County due to a crash in Centerville on southbound I-15 by Parish Lane, blocking left lanes of travel. And it is still causing stop-and-go delays into Farmington past the West Davis Highway merge. Now, if you're trying to get into the Salt Lake County area from the north, you may want to consider an alternate like Highway 89 or Legacy Parkway. We've also had some backups northbound on I-215's west belt starting after California Avenue up to about North Temple. It looks like whatever was causing this is now out of traffic on the right shoulder. Get ready for memorable summer evenings with the Utah Symphony, July 5th through August 9th in Park City. Tickets are on sale now at DeerValleyMusicFestival.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
It'll be much cooler than yesterday with a high of 87, and the highs stay in the 80s through the 4th of July. Right now, 79 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to KSL News Radio. This is Inside Sources. I'm Adam Gardner here with KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas, and we're filling in for Boyd today. Greg, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, I'm sure. This was prompted by an editorial in the Deseret News today by Derek Monson of the Sutherland Institute, and it's titled, Utah's Primary Election Results Raise Questions About Caucus Convention System. So I think that this subject is going to keep coming up just because we're kind of almost officially done with the primaries here in the next week. I don't think that this issue is going away.
And I don't think it's ever been more prominent than this year.
Why do you say that?
If you look at the we've been talking about this a little bit, the big six, the top six races, governor, Senate, AG, and the 3 congressional races that are currently open. Burgess Owens didn't have an opponent. If you look at what happened at the convention in 5 of those 6, the result was significantly different than what happened at the primary, which was just a week ago.
So Governor Spencer Cox got 32%.
Yeah, he wouldn't have even been on the ballot.
He wouldn't
have even been on the ballot had the 60% rule held.
Wins right now, it's looking like he has about 55%.
Had we not the signature process, right? Yes, and he's going to win by at least double digits.
John Curtis didn't stand a chance in the convention system. He ended up winning handily.
Big numbers, right?
Out of 5 candidates,
right.
He did really, really well. I think he did over 50%.
Yeah, right.
And so it's calling into question, like, is this the correct way to nominate our candidates? And Derek, who is a guest on the show with us, Derek, first of all, thanks for joining.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
You know what? You ended your op-ed with some. You weren't pulling any punches here. You said if the caucus convention system cannot be made to promote the constitutional principles regarding factions and elections laid out by the framers, then civic devotion to the Constitution and accountability to taxpayers demands that we seek out a better way to nominate candidates for public office. Wow.
Yeah, really what this is about is we need a better framework than did my candidate win to be able to evaluate.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so it's easy. For instance, if you attended convention and saw what the result was there, and then you see the results in the primary election. If you were a fan of Phil Lyman, you might think, oh, the convention is where, so that's what we ought to be deciding. How we ought to be deciding who's nominated. And if you're not a fan of those things, you might say, well, hey, I like Governor Cox, and that's who won, so I'm happy. And but that's a pretty flimsy way to decide an important policy decision about how we nominate who gets to represent us. And so, the goal in that article was to think about, is there a set of principles we can turn to that regardless of who wins, whichever process you might go into, we can use to evaluate, is that a good process or not? Is that doing what our election system is supposed to do, which again, in kind of the views of the framers was to make sure that factions don't just take over, or you might say, tribes, or there's lots of different things we might call them today. The word they use was faction, that they're not kind of getting the chance to just override the broader will of the people, the good of the people, for a kind of a special interest kind of political goal and that kind of a thing. And are we representing what people really want?
And Derek, I want to follow up with something because I'm so interested in this article because you do phrase it in terms of a constitutional analysis and the framers of the Constitution, because we've had some talk by at least one candidate who is seemingly losing that the signature gathering process is unconstitutional and that the only constitutional framework we have for picking our candidates is the caucus convention system. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so again, knowing this is politics, and it's a lot about trying to get into power and stay in power. It's easy to look at the Constitution as a means to an end in that kind of framework. If you look at get into some of the legal details, and then Greg, I know you're an attorney, and that's important stuff. So I'm not trying to say that's not important, but there's a deeper set of principles at play. And that's really, I think, where we can, anybody, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a policymaker, just an average voter, you can look at what the spirit of the Constitution was supposed to do and what it was intended and designed to do. And then say, you know what, we want to be true to that because we recognize that's a good system that's produced everything good that we've had in this country since its founding, ultimately. It's been a part of that. And so we can kind of look at those principles and say, there are constitutional debates that are going to happen in courtrooms, obviously, about what is constitutional, what is not. But from a policy standpoint, what is the right policy approach? And those are more about the principles in the Constitution.
Okay, so you mentioned the Constitution. You mentioned the framers. They cautioned against factions, but they quickly, after George Washington kind of faded away from public view, they quickly broke up into factions and Federalists versus Republicans. So they didn't last long, only about 8 years. So if that happened then, is there any hope for us, and how do we go about making a change?
Well, I think this is a differentiation between what is a faction versus a political party. Political parties don't have to simply be all about empowering a small group of people. That's oftentimes how they operate today, but that hasn't always been the case. And broadly speaking, I think parties are generally about just trying to get a certain kind of set of ideas or a group of people into office, and then those people have to then represent, according to our constitutional design, the broad interests of people if our elections are structured the right way, because then if they don't do that, they're not going to get reelected. The problem is that today we kind of allow parties to function more as representing a certain set of tribal interests, and then empower through election system that set of tribal interests. So there isn't that broader accountability to the people. And that's where there's a real conversation and need for possible reforms of how we structure primary elections, as well as potentially general elections for that matter.
Derek, we've only got about a minute left, but do you suppose that those that worked on this, what we now call the signature gathering process, were conscious of what you're talking about here and thought that we needed to have a different avenue to get to the primary?
Well, there wasn't primaries back then, so I think they were thinking in terms of, just how do we create a system that's broadly representative of the will of the people and gives people a place to channel their passions and desires in ways that don't lead to things like violence or, revolts and that kind of thing. And so we're trying to, with this article, take those principles and apply them to something that they couldn't have envisioned because they didn't exist. But it still is a question of, are we structuring things to hold true to that spirit of the Constitution, or structuring them in ways that actually undermine it and actually go contrary to what makes our nation great?
Derek Monson, thanks so much for joining us from the Sutherland Institute.
That's worth a read, by the way. We should alert our readers to read his article. This is really interesting.
It's really good. Stay with us. We're going to be talking about the far left and the far right when we come back.
And I said to myself, sit down, you're rocking the boat.
Join Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater July 5th through August 3rd for show-stopping performances in Logan. Professional performers from Broadway and all over bring you Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, the lively classic Guys and Dolls, the hilarious Anything Goes with spectacular tap dancing and music by Cole Porter, cult classic Little Shop of Horrors, and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Stop the commercial! I'm interrupting myself to tell you that Utah students K-12 can get a free ticket to all Utah Festival performances this summer. Claim yours online now. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Cult classic Little Shop of Horrors and Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi with its sequel Buoso's Ghost. Plus, late-night cabarets, 5 concerts, breakfast with the stars, academy classes, and more. Tickets at utahfestival.org. utahfestival.org.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
911, what's your emergency? Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
On September 12, 1995, McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas.
There was no sign of forced entry. It was just as if McKay had walked out of his own free will.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, feels that justice was never truly served. Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
At JCW's, we think tipping might be getting a little out of hand. Like when you're asked to tip at the register before you've even been served, or when you're at the yogurt shop and find yourself serving yourself. And don't even get us started on frosted tips making a comeback. That's why at JCW's, when you pay for a 3rd-pound ranch bacon cheeseburger, that's what you pay. And no one at the register is going to stare longingly at you while you awkwardly maneuver through the tip screen for food you don't even have yet. Honestly, we're just happy to see you at any of our 5 locations in Provo, South Jordan, Lehigh, Harriman, and American Fork. So come on in and enjoy some quality time and great food with family and friends. And we promise, we won't be pushing you for a tip.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's, and we just want to say thank you, and especially to our loyal customers. We want you to know that at JCW's, your business is all the tip we need. JCW's, quality and a lot of it.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the man accused of murder and the death of Dylan Rounds has been sentenced on 3 counts to 1 to 30 years in prison. Second, the U.S. Marshals Service says 200 missing and endangered children have been rescued in a nationwide operation. Third, a captain from the Salt Lake City Fire Department drowned in a rafting accident inside Dinosaur National Monument. 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources. We're not Boyd Matheson. We're Greg Skordas and Adam Gardner. And I think that we've had a really interesting show this afternoon, Adam. But I want to go back to a couple of segments and just kind of get your take on this. We had Jason Perry on earlier talking about the debate. And I wanted to talk about the debate because it still lingers. And the fact that Trump gets convicted of a felony, there's not a huge movement in terms of support. Biden stumbles horribly in the debate, but the Democrats are still large. I don't know that the voting numbers or the percentages have changed much. And then we just had this Derek Monson from the Sutherland Institute talking to us about why it is that the problem, I guess I should say, with the caucus convention system coming out with a group of candidates and then the primaries coming out to a different set. And I don't know that I'm tying these together particularly well as you did during the break, which is this sort of factionalism, this notion that we have right now in this country that, you know, you're either right or you're left. And your candidate might do something horrible, but you take one for the team. You don't change your mind. My candidate's convicted of 34 felonies. He's still my guy. My candidate's old and sort of dribbles and, is hard to understand, but he's my guy.
Well, it's interesting because Jason Perry mentioned where he was watching the debate through a different lens.
Yeah.
So the University of Utah was supposed to have a third presidential debate on campus. Well, that was a really big deal. They put a lot of money into it. The legislature even put money into having this thing, and then it kind of goes away. So he's saying, I watched the debate through this lens. And I think we all watched the debate through different lenses.
Oh, no question. I'm guilty of that myself. Yep.
You have factions that love Donald Trump, and I would say it's probably 40 to 50% of the Republican Party who will back him no matter what. And I'm literally meaning no matter what.
Right.
And so they watched it and said, yep, told the truth, awesome guy, he's still my guy, more power to you, don't let him bring you down, right? And then you had some that are, I'm just curious, I'm not a fan of Trump, I'm not a fan of Biden, and I was listening to this on a walk, and I had to pull out my phone because I was like, I got to see what their faces look like, I got to see what they're doing. And we all knew that Trump would be the way that he is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any mystery. Most of his answers were not truthful. A lot of them were, and he wasn't as combative. But like Jason Perry said, all of our worst fears were confirmed with Joe Biden. He did not do well,
and that was my fear going in. I mean, I'm a Biden fan. Let's face it. I'm a Democrat, and people know that about me. And my fear watching that debate was, Joe, don't look like an old man. Just come in, be Sprite, say some fun things, be on top of your game. I don't care what you say. Just don't dog it. Don't come across as an old man. And he failed. And I mean, I've heard some pundits say, he had one job to do, which was show everybody that he still got it together.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? The economy, say what you want. Immigration, say what you want. Those are problems. Those are areas that Democrats are suffering. And I knew that those would be hot topic issues. But I also knew in my heart, my guy, Biden, had to be strong, and he wasn't. And it was hard because I couldn't watch the end of the debate. I mean, I just had to. This is a train wreck.
Right.
This is a train wreck happening right in front of me.
And the way that the pundits and that mainstream media really covers the different presidencies are pretty wildly different. And look, I'm no fan of either of them, but I think last election, pundits and the New York Times and others, they mentioned the 25th Amendment on Donald Trump hundreds and hundreds of times. They have never mentioned that for Joe Biden. So it's not even a discussion, even though I think Americans know that he's not all there. They're like, well, his staff is really taking care of him. They're doing a great job. Well, that's not the conversation that you had with President Trump. And I think I can see why Trump voters and Republicans get a little upset. And I one of my favorite accounts on X, a well-known attorney, and it's at AG Hamilton 29. He did a quick poll on X.
This is really interesting. Yep.
And he wanted to find out how many times the mainstream outlets use the term far right and far left just in their X accounts. The New York Times used the phrase far right 92 times, far left 0. Washington Post said far right 113 times, far left 3. NBC News said far right 65 times. 1 time did they say far left. And then our good friends at Fox News used the term far right 17 times, far left 118 times.
No surprise.
No surprise there.
But I am surprised about the first 4. I mean, I really am.
We talk about factions.
Right.
And we just had that great segment on factions. This is what we're talking about.
Sure it is.
We're factionalizing our country, and everything is being reported instead of just news as one side is evil and the other side, just needs to get it under control. And that's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really been a problem. It's really been something that's come out much, much more. I think this year's presidential race, I think the public has absolutely every reason to be frustrated with both candidates. I've had people say, is that the best we can do? And I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that anymore. I mean, if Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the best two Americans to sit for the office of presidency, we're in trouble. Because you can name 50 people right here in Utah who are public politicians who I would say, I'll vote for that person tomorrow to be president of the United States. You know what I mean? And I don't know. But to go back to your point, that's where we are. You're a Trumpster. You're a Biden supporter. You're a Democrat. You're a Republican. It's really caused a problem. And I think we do what we can. We're trying to balance it out. You every once in a while you have a third party candidate that comes in. Those have all been pretty much a disaster. I mean, you got to admit the Evan McMullen experiment was a failure. Yeah. We thought, well, if we can't get a Democrat in the Senate, let's at least get somebody who's not a Republican. His numbers were no different than what the Democrat
they
probably
stayed exactly the same.
Yeah, 30%. And
it's really interesting. I think, just kind of to finish up here, Donald Trump was running again, but he had 10 others that were willing to challenge him. So we put up a new slate of candidates. Some of them were awesome.
Sure.
And the party
really
said,
good.
No thanks.
Right.
We're done. We're going to stick with this guy. And on the Democrat side, it's really interesting to me, and I mentioned this to you before, democracy is on the ballot.
Yeah.
And that's what the Biden administration keeps saying. If democracy is really on the ballot and it's the most important thing and your presidential candidate is the only thing standing in the way, is Biden really your guy?
That's right. I agree 100%. If democracy is the primary item, we need a different candidate. Lots of fun with you today, and we'll be back on Inside Sources tomorrow. Stay tuned for Jeff Kaplan. For Maria Soleos, filling in for Jeff Kaplan.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 23 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Maria Shaleo, sitting in today for Jeff Kaplan. It's mostly cloudy downtown and 79 degrees. KSL's top story. The U.S. Supreme Court has sided with Donald Trump in the case of his immunity. KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas begins our team coverage, presidential immunity.
If it's the court